Welcome to the Seton LaSalle Innovation Lab tutorial on soldering table. Soldering is a process in which two or more metals are joined together by melting and then flowing a filler metal into the joint, the filler metal having a relatively low melting point. Soldering is used to form a permanent connection between electronic components. The metal to be soldered is heated with a soldering iron and then soldered is melted into the connection. Only the solder metals, not the parts, are being soldered. Solder is a metallic glue that holds the parts together and forms a connection that allows electric current to flow. Step 1. Always read through the safety checklist. Preparing the solder iron is called tinning the tip. Place the soldering iron in its stand and plug it in. Wait for the soldering iron to heat up. Moisten the sponge. Wipe the tip of the iron on the damp sponge. This will clean the tip. Our table is also equipped with a brass scour pad. You can use that instead of the sponge. Melt a little solder on the tip of the iron. This is called tinning, and it will help the heat flow from the iron's tip to the joint. The solder should flow onto the tip, producing a bright, shiny surface. If the solder will not flow onto the tip, clean it by wiping it on the wet sponge. When tinned, wipe excess solder off the wet sponge. You do not need to tin the tip before every joint, but you should re-tin if it has gone dull when the soldering iron has not been used for a few minutes. The tip of the soldering iron should be shiny silver color. If it is black and pitted, replace it with a new one. First, solder needs a clean surface on which to adhere, if you are soldering onto a circuit board. Buff the copper foil on a PC board with steel wool before soldering. Remove any oil, paint, wax, etc. with a solvent, steel wool, or fine sandpaper. To solder, heat the connection with the tip of the soldering iron for a few seconds, then apply the solder. Heat the connection, not the solder. Hold the soldering iron like a pen near the base of the handle. Both parts that are being soldered have to be hot to form a good connection. Keep the soldering tip on the connection as the solder is applied. Solder will flow into and around well-heated connections. Use just enough solder to form a strong connection. Remove the tip from the connection as soon as the solder has flowed where you want it to be. Remove the solder, then the iron. Don't move the connection while the solder is cooling. Don't overheat the connection, as this might damage the electrical component that you are soldering. A helping hand can be used as the heat sink to protect these components. Soldering a connection should just take a few seconds. If it is taking longer, see tips and tricks. Inspect the joint closely. It should look shiny. If the connection looks bad, reheat it and try again. Wipe the tip of the iron on a damp sponge or brass scour pad to clean it. The tip should now be shiny. Unplug the soldering iron when it is not used. Check the "make it look like this" picture before you walk away from the table.